Good afternoon. That was very, very tired. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I want to call to order the Commission to Study Slavery and Subsequent Jure and the Facto Racial and Economic Discrimination against African American on Wednesday, March the 29th at 1 p.m. 2023. And we're here at the Virginia Museum of History and Culture. And we certainly want to thank the staff and the executive director and all who are here. I mean, part of this great museum and iconic place actually in our community in RVA. It is always a delight to come here and to bring individuals to see all the great work that has been done and what they're doing here, and as a contribution to the Commonwealth. They contribute greatly in telling the stories, the truth, making available information and through research and other ways. And we are certainly grateful to them for allowing us to be here today. And the museum made available to us for the meeting today. So thank you again. At this time, we're still waiting for maybe at least one person to have a quorum, with that understanding that we would be okay and we would have folks in place. However, we will wait, and we're going through with the meetings. We just won't be able to vote on anything until any of the agenda items until we have someone who's here, another person who's here. I'm going to give you an opportunity to take this opportunity to just go around the table and introduce yourself or present yourself really as the commission. And then we have some guests in the room. And so we're going to even pause a moment and allow them to introduce themselves. We're delighted to have you here today, and thank you for your interest. And there's Senator Locke, okay, interest in the work that's being done. But if we, Dr. Ayers, if we could start with you, we'd certainly appreciate that, and we'll go around the room.
Thanks very much. I'm Ed Ayers, President Emeritus of University of Richmond, and historian of the American South.
Awesome.
Hi, I'm Jody Allen. I'm a historian. I teach at William & Mary, and I'm the director of the Living Project, A Journey of Reconciliation.
Awesome.
I'm Andrea Douglas, and I'm the executive director of the Jefferson School African American Heritage Center in Charlotte.
Hi, I'm Cassandra Newby Alexander. I'm the endowed professor of history, of Black history and culture at Norfolk State University.
Yes. Introduce yourself.
I'm coming here, Norfolk, and glad to be here.
Awesome.
And this is Mighty Boone right here.
All right.
I'm Eve. I'm a mom and private citizen and interested in.
Awesome, thank you.
I'm Melissa Williams. I am a military veteran. I am a graduate of the illustrious Norfolk State University. I am also a Black American who just happens to be a descendant of a person who was enslaved.
Okay.
My name is James. I'm the founder of the Bear Arms Academy, a private security company and firearms training company. I'm also a private citizen, as you said, and I also descend from the U.S. chattel slavery, Virginia. Ancestors here in Virginia as well, and I'm actually coming from Central Virginia, Spotsylvania County.
Oh, okay. Awesome. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you.
And my name is Bob. I am here as a resident of Chesterfield County, just learning a little more.
Awesome.
Happy to be here.
We're delighted to have you. And I guess I didn't introduce myself. I'm Dolores McQuinn, and the chair of this commission, along with my co-chair, vice chair, Senator Mamie Locke, who is she able to introduce Senator Locke? Is she driving? Yeah. Okay. So we have Senator Locke, who is with us as well. And good afternoon to you, Senator, and all of those who are here. Again, we're delighted to have you. at the appropriate time. If she can speak, then I'm sure she will.
Can you hear me?
Yes, good afternoon.
Okay, all right. All right, I'm driving, so,
Okay.
and I'm driving in DC traffic, so I'm not gonna
Oh,
talk.
Lord, oh, Lord. Mercy. Mercy. Well, we're glad that you're here. Thank you. And then I think, Xavier Robinson is on as well. Okay, Xavier? Maybe? I mean, Richardson, I'm sorry. And I have glasses on. Mr. Richardson? Okay. Okay, he's driving as well. Well, we're delighted that both of them are on, and I'm hoping, they can hear what's going on. So thank you again, and in particular, thanks to the commissioner for their work and commitment. I know that this is a very busy time for many of you, in particular those who are at university level and making contributions there. But we appreciate you scheduling the time to be here. You and all of us know that this is very important work and central to the, making an imprint and impression on Virginians, period, about the many dynamics of slavery and how it affected, generations of people even to now. And this particular commission, it had been given the charge to look at these various aspects of slavery to present day, and how did it affect, again, generations of people. And I want to say that the generations of individuals that were impacted are not just individuals who look like me. The entire establishment was affected. Unfortunately, we have not looked at it from that perspective. So as African Americans or enslaved African Americans were affected, so was white communities, so was the Indian. I mean, various races of people were impacted by this, and we remain impacted. And I often say, when you're given the belief, or you believe that there's a level of superiority that exists with you and in you because of the color of your skin, then that lends itself just a bigger problem, as it does when we are walking around and feeling that our color of our skin does not always work for us. So I think that what you are bringing to the table, and especially those who, this is your professional life in terms of understanding history, bringing it to the forefront, sharing your intellectual contribution. We are just extremely grateful, and I'm convinced that the final product, which will be in January, the final report will be made in January. I think that your handprints, that would be a shining light what has happened in Virginia. And so all of us will get an opportunity to see it in black and white. And this is through research, it's again through your intellectual contribution. And the report will come out, and I think it would benefit all of us better understanding history and the significance of history, significance of the study, and the impact of those who sit here at the table to help us get to the finish line. So I'm going to move on now to the approval of the agenda and the previous meeting minutes. I'm sure you all have looked at those. And at this time, I would, if there are no objections or corrections for the minutes, I ask that there be a motion made to approve the minutes as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion has been made and properly second for the approval of the minutes as presented. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those that oppose, there are none. Moving right along. So at this time, and I guess in many ways I have already, the chair's report, talking point for the 2020 annual report. The report was submitted to the Legislative Information System on January the 10th. So we did make, the initial or the preliminary report was moved forward. We, as of the date, at this time, we have not heard back from anyone and any objection, assuming they read it, okay? But they may still have some once they actually read it. However, we have not heard anything, any kind of pushback on the report. And the report including the following activities: the hiring and the onboarding of a project manager. The report also included approving and implementing the extended research plan, the launching of the website, and the establishing of the subcommittees. It also looked at the activities that would take place during 2023 as relates to continuing the research, engaging with subject matters, experts and specialists, and then making the public aware, bringing about public awareness as well as public participation. And so I still encourage, I'm so glad that we have guests here today with us, because it is going to be extremely important for the public to know exactly what we're doing. And Dominique has done an amazing job in putting that information out there. But we all want to encourage public input to come here to see what we're doing, and so that we can also hear from them in terms of what their thoughts are as it relates to what we're doing. And then we did share with them that the final report will be in January 2024 with the recommendations from the research and the work that we have done. Okay, that audience. So this is that is, I think that's it as it relates to my report. But at this time, we're gonna ask Dominique to come, who's the project manager and been doing an amazing job. Thank you, Dominique. So Dominique will share with us at this time the project manager's report. Thank you.
Can I ask
Yes.
a question right before?
Okay, all right. Yes, okay, I should have asked, was there any question?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was wondering is, my concern about our website
Okay.
is I would not want to see any of the information that we pulled together that we've made available, able to be pulled down
Okay.
by any future administrations. And so I'm wondering, are there safeguards to ensuring that this information continues to be made available? It's not part of political football. Rather it's a resource available to the general public, but also to educators.
I guess Dominique can respond to that, and I certainly acknowledge your legitimate concern in light of the environment. Yeah, so Dominique, would you be able to respond or either?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Delegate. Thank you, Dr. Newby Alexander, for your question. I hate to toss the question to another person. So I receive and acknowledge the question, and I hate to toss it to another person, but just for a reiteration, the website is hosted on an LVA, on a Library of Virginia server within the library. Dr. Kimball, would you be able to speak to this question?
Would. Yes, I mean, it is hosted at the library. It's not the only outside entity that is hosted on our website. We've never had a request to remove anything from our website from the executive, but we are part of the executive branch, as you know. What I would suggest is, this really is a question for Sandy, of head of the agency. I'd be happy to ask it. We control what we can control. But we might be able to at least get some answers in terms of that content and making sure that it remains on the web in some form. But I don't want to be premature and suggest there's no intimation that anybody is even thinking about that. But it might be worth a conversation with Sandy. And it could be something that delegate could have directly with her.
Yeah, and I'll follow up on that. Because I think that's a legitimate question. Yeah, there are some reasons to be concerned about some of this stuff. Okay.
I have another question.
Yes.
To report.
Dr.
What would you imagine a public facing presentation of our materials look like? Do we have be a public meeting or something like that after January?
I think that actually that we should have some, prior to even the final report being made, we ought to have some kind of public meeting that we invite the public and let them inform them about, how long it has been, what we've done, who was the players, this information now that is going to be, it really is, it really is a gift, if for lack of a better word, to the overall community. And again, with you, I don't take it lightly that you all are sitting here and with all of the work that you all have done for years and years and years, for decades, just looking at these particular issues. So I think prior to that, it should be one big public meeting. I would say a meeting so we could go around the Commonwealth, but
Could we consider contacting C-SPAN?
yes.
And that way
Yes.
it could be available not just to Virginians,
Right.
but the larger public and live on their website. So that we could have actually, instead of just a meeting, can have a forum, presentations, discussions, different entities that are part of it, talk about, how we're preserving this history, what potential impact it can have, and even have an individual like the president of the Virginia Social Studies Association, be there to talk about the material and how important it is for them as a resource.
So thank you, Dr. Alexander, for giving such strong consideration to sharing how we rolled it out. And you can choose wherever you want. I would, and we would certainly assist. And anyone is necessary. Yeah, I think, you know what, all I think is just, the sky in terms of how we roll it out and who we engage in. Yeah, and I think we have some folks who will be very much interested in it. But what is going on, and many of you may have seen across the country, this is, a lot of discussion happening in relation to this. And how do you, our recommendation will speak to what so many people are, the entities are doing now, across the country. And so I still say we were the first, but we were a little slow rolling things out like we should. But I just think it's going to be a powerful statement. I don't know if anyone's doing what we have done in terms of this kind of 2-year, 3-year study. And I say 3 years because COVID was sort of slowed down the progress. But we're now in a place that we can roll it out and go on. But I think that's a great suggestion. Anything else that you want?
If I can build on that.
Yes, and Dr. Ayers wants to assist you in that.
So I just put in your comment that it would be useful to have public comment before we make the final recommendations, right? But
Yes.
we need draft recommendations in order for it to be a meaningful conversation. So I will look forward to the overweening power of the new chair, Dr. Ruby Alexander, to think about how we might sequence that. Because I think rather than, it would be good to have something to focus the conversation.
Yes.
So I don't, that's December, perhaps something like that.
Yes. Okay. She's so willing to work so hard. Okay, thank you. Thank you all so much for that. Anyone else? Okay. All right, Ms. Dominique, you're on.
Thank you so much for allowing me to share very briefly with you. And I hope for those of us joining virtually, you are still able to see the shared screen. because we weren't able to share it, because I wasn't able to share with you the website during our last meeting, I just wanted to make sure that you've all had an opportunity to see it. And if you have any questions, edits, or amendments to the website, I'd be more than happy to make those changes. Again, this website is hosted at the Library of Virginia, but we will make sure I'll check in with Greg and Dr. Treadway about the questions that were previously asked. It's a fairly straightforward website, and it includes information regarding about the commission and the charges of the commission. This information was pulled directly from the bill and is available more or less copy and pasted out of the Virginia Code. There's nothing on the website that isn't publicly available in the Virginia Code. Additionally, there is a page that lists all of the members. If you would like anything titled, name, photograph changed, please just let me know. There's also a tab that lists information related to all of our meetings. So not only are all of our meetings listed here on our website, but they're also listed on Town Hall, the House page, the General Assembly page. They're listed in several places, but we can always refer to this page. This page is always updated through the Library of Virginia. And then finally, here is a contact form. This form is for any member of the public for any comment, question, or concern. This form feeds into my email address, and I would then confer that information back to the delegate. Any questions on the website so far? It's pretty straightforward.
Just one question. Will the website have a big tab for resources?
We can absolutely have that conversation. And I mean, we have plenty of resources to put in it, and we'd absolutely be able to. I don't want to speak on our IT department's behalf, but I do not foresee that being an issue to add a tab for our resources. Yes.
And could you pull it back up?
Yes.
And there should be some place in there for searching.
Okay, absolutely.
And, you know, and if, I don't know if you want to divide the resources up, you have a drop down menu, or, you know, what kinds of resources you're talking about, primary, bibliography, that kind of thing. You know, additional websites, you know, because the others I don't think are drop downs. You just click it.
They're all just the click. Yes, they're all single landing pages.
Okay.
And I think any books that we were talking about reading or recommendations that have been made, that we could also add those to it as well.
We can, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, since it's a single click, you might actually want to separate it out,
Okay.
you know, for each of the things.
Absolutely.
Perhaps organized by subcommittee
Yeah.
topic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
We can do that.
Yes.
Thank you. Again, I won't speak on behalf of our IT department, but I don't foresee that being a problem whatsoever. And I'd be happy to work on that and follow up. Thank you so much. I only have one other thing, and I promise I won't take up too much time. The only other item as a part of my project manager's report is to give you, and I'll go back to my seat for this one, is to make sure that you've seen, I've provided a list of resources in the internal paperclip portion of your packet. This paperclip packet is essentially the world's most detailed research bibliography as beginning to be organized into the subcommittees as taken from the legislation. This is not the end all be all of what will be. This is just as a follow-up. The research phase was indeed broken into the 4 phases that we discussed last time as approved by the project plan. And this is just one example of what that output might look like. In this packet, you will see portions of the bill, the language that you will recognize, and then that portion of the bill separated yet again into the different subcommittees. And in each portion, you will find books, articles, websites, journals, what have you. And oftentimes there's also a little bit of text that I've added, not interpretive, more just description. It's an annotated bibliography for any other university or academic individuals in the room. It's an illustrated annotated bibliography. Just a quick sentence or two about what each resource is and why it is included. Again, some have books, some have articles, some have journals. It's quite a hodgepodge in there, and so I hope that it is organized to your satisfaction. I'm happy to receive any feedback that you have as you peruse the document. And things like this is exactly what we could then translate into its digital format onto the website. Thank you so much.
Question?
Any questions, any?
I imagine that there is a bibliography of Virginia history that the library has. And sort of, is that correct? Because I
Many
think a select bibliography tailored to the purposes of this would be useful. Just looking over this, I can think of books that are about Virginia's history that would be especially pertinent to this. That would be my request, is that we have a bibliography that's points toward recommendations as they pertain to the Commonwealth.
I would just say, tell me if I'm wrong, but this is really a sample in a way.
It is.
Yeah, so we have a spreadsheet that has lots more stuff in it. And that people like John Deal and our staff and Brent have been contributing to.
Well, as we think about, especially the public component of this, having something that's a manageable, what's the greatest hits reading list that you would have about Virginia's history as relates to the subjects of this commission, which strikes me as a useful step toward the public component of our work. So more is always great, but sometimes focus would be useful as we try to explain, centuries of history to folks. It would be good to have. And it turns out, of course, that a lot of the best history in the United States on these topics are also history of Virginia. So I think we have some great things to display. Thank you.
Thank you. And you know what? I owe Dr. Kimball apology, because when we were going around the table introducing, you did not introduce yourself.
Okay, that's fine. I'd like to be in the background.
No.
I'm Greg Kimball, and I'm the Director of Public Services and Outreach at the library. And obviously, we're very excited to be helping with this project. Long overdue.
Thank you. Yes,
One
any
of-
questions?
Actually, I had a suggestion under the resources, the research bibliography for the discriminatory laws and so forth. Perhaps you all can also add the report that was done by the commission to examine racial inequality in Virginia law, since that was a fairly recent accomplishment. And people can actually see those laws. I understand that from many of the commissioners who were former or current judges and so forth, that they were actually surprised by the number of laws that were still on the books. And so it would, be a resource, a very good resource, even for law school students. To see that, you have all these laws, and even though they're not enforced, no one has actually taken them.
To build on that, it seems this is a question too. Are we concerned only since statehood, or is the colonial past so important to the United States a part of our mission?
Wait a minute, I'm sorry, I didn't get the question.
I've noticed that most of these readings are about since Virginia entered the United States, but the colonial past of slavery obviously is crucial importance. And instead of building on Cassandra's point about being able to take advantage of the history of the laws, the evolution since the early 17th century about all of this, I thought it may be good for us to clarify our sense of scope on that. You all have thoughts about that?
I always assumed that we were talking 1607 forward.
Right,
Yeah.
right, yeah. But I don't think that there's any reason why we are to maybe, in some form of documentation, add that to it, you know what I'm saying, make it a part of it so that people understand it didn't start necessarily then, you know, it will just continue to be perpetuated. So I think that we're looking at resources and leading people to information, you know, that I think it was very appropriate to add that to it, you know, in some way. And I don't know if there's a, you know, in terms of list of books or documentation or something that could help sort of Dominique to reflect that in their work, in their final work.
You could argue that Virginia's most important contribution in many ways was hammering out the law of what Anglo-American slavery would look like, you know? And I think it's important that, I mean, one of the legacies is that Virginia gave us the United States, and has particular historical responsibility and burden. So I just want to be. I agree with all that, and I was hoping the answer was yes. We're doing 1607.
When you think about Leon, think of the opposite matter of color that deals not just the laws, but court cases. June Purcell Gill, I think it is, who, you know, looked at laws specifically in Virginia that dealt with African Americans. And there are whole, you know, there are hosts of other folks dealt with a similar type of going through and picking out, you know, putting it into chronological as well as thematic would, I think, be very useful. Because, especially because you have so many people who just don't know. And, you know, and it's a tremendous resource and educational resource for people to see these laws, to see that so many of the laws that then were adopted in the post-Reconstruction era actually were slave laws that were sort of readjusted. Eliminating the word, but keeping the intent the same.
I think that's, you know, I think that would be, I mean, I guess we, in doing this and what we are part of, you know, really in all of it, I'm sure folks will come behind us, there will be some other folks who continue to build on. But as the inaugural commission, basically, looking at this to this degree, we want to be as, I guess, purposeful we can be in making sure that people understand, you know, the origin of this stuff. You know, that they continue right on through, and changing in the evolution that you talked about. No longer hand, you know, shackles, but maybe invisible in ways when you look at the criminal justice system, look at other things that people are dealing with, and all of this is, you know, certainly have led to us pausing to look at this stuff in such a critical way. And what we're going to leave is to generations of academia and all those of this information to help them continue to build on. So I think that's very, very appropriate. Anything else? All right. Okay, we're gonna move on. In terms of the subcommittee reports, now, the subcommittee thoughts or subcommittees. How
about subcommittee question?
Subcommittee question, that would be good.
I wonder if you might sketch what you might see our finalist document like. As I think about, is this appropriate time or is that later?
No, I think that's fine. So well, just clarification with you in terms of our final report or in terms of these subcommittee report.
how these subcommittees would fit into a final report. So I meant, and so, you know, are we looking for a statement or two, a recommendation for each subcommittee that you would see as actionable in some way by the General Assembly? In which case we're looking for a relatively focused conclusion to draw from this research. Are we looking at a 5-page document at the end that pulls these together? Do you have some sense of what we might? Okay, as I think about, you know, what I would say about economics or criminal justice, what's the most useful thing we can say, the form of it? So, I'm working in the area with that.
Dominique, do you have the information statements and that I asked that was sent back to each commissioner in terms of the road and what we were expecting from the committee? You have that?
Yes, ma'am. It's in your packet. It's the 4th document in your packet,
Okay.
right before the bibliography.
Okay. So you can pull it up on there, right?
No, no.
Okay. So you want to go, I don't need this,
So where it ends, we're on this last page.
okay.
And just identify potential opportunities for legislation that address the systematic and historical implications affecting quality of life of significant population of African families. Is that sort of what we're? I see there's also preliminary strategies to foster educational understanding. I guess it seems to me that Dominique is doing great work on the bibliographic sources and subject of that work. But as I think about, it's been a long time since I was in the General Assembly, but I don't recall exactly how we craft something that would be actionable that way.
Well, listen, if we can craft it and so it can be actionable, now whether they become an action, yeah, basically the General Assembly. But I think that this final report, because it says in the, not in the report, the objective of the commission and the work that we're doing, to make recommendations, okay, at the end. So
Yes.
what do we recommend to the powers that be? That we begin to immediately, and I always talk about the education piece as an example. When you talk about the education, and some of them are doing it now. So the universities that were built, the university was built by the hands of enslaved Africans, African Americans, whatnot, over these years. And how do we look at what the kind of investment that they receive, and what have they done, if anything, or should be doing to make sure that now the opportunity to reinvest in those Black communities, those communities that were actually that they benefited from in such a monumental way. So that, and even economic, the disparities that have been created, how do we go back now and look at the disparities and what would we consider a way of I guess revisiting what has happened, and then in many ways compensating or repairing or whatever those communities that have been so damaged by again, by the challenges that went that way.
So perhaps our recommendation is that consideration take place rather than what that consideration is.
I listen, we got one bite of this apple, right? And I said we need to bite it. So what, basically what happens or how it's once it's put out there, we can't say, well, first of all, you didn't have the research, you didn't have facts, you had all of those things that was necessary. And that's what, as we talked about this whole issue reparation and compensating and people for, what they have lost over the years. You know, it's easy to say, well, and as I heard, just, I wasn't here, you weren't here, so why, da, da, da. But the impact has continued straight on through 2023 and 2033 and 2043. It will still continue until we begin to bring some resolution to that. And so once we put this out there and even make the recommendation, people can try to be dismissive of it and say, well, we don't have any truth. We don't know how many people was impacted by it, but we just need to put it out there. We need to do what this commission has been charged to do. And, as I would say, sometimes the chips will fall where they may. I mean, that's.
So just as a follow-up,
Okay.
since I'm along with Dr. Douglas,
Mhm.
we're looking at the education committee, subcommittee.
Mhm.
So part of what we should do is create a bibliography that looks at education for African Americans, especially here in Virginia. There are a plethora of books that deal with that. And also identify issues regarding unequal funding. I'm always reminded of, in the 1940s, the Journal and Guide ratted the state out, so to speak. They found that the state was redirecting upwards of $30,000 a year from individual Black school districts and redirecting that funding to white school districts. Virginia was also, and different municipalities were underfunding. They were paying Black teachers less. This goes into the 1980s. And so are you suggesting that we kind of point out some of these issues and refer to, I guess, the sources?
Yes.
Some of these, okay.
Yeah, massive resistance, the impact that it had on, you know, the Commonwealth of Virginia, the whole court case and how people were, you know, it really disengaged Black communities in education. I don't know, but I'm probably the only one here. I remember as a going to school, and I lived in Eastern Henrico. Okay, you were okay. Eastern Henrico, and had to go all the way to Virginia Randolph. Okay, so I lived some of that. And the, you know, the Black schools that we went and passed all of the other schools that were all along the way. So those things had, you know, the impact of it. And then when you go into integrations, it was impact too, because I went to a school that didn't want me there. I went to a high school, they didn't want me there, you know, and they didn't want any of us there, not just me. I mean, I wouldn't want to be there, but they just didn't want African Americans there. And so we were treated in a way that said, we don't want you here. Many of us talk about that now, you know, how the impact of that. So those kind of things, see, generations have gone on and some of them don't even know about it. They don't even understand where we are, even with the housing development, you know, all the folks being put in, you know, certain area of the city and then not being able to live where you want and desire where you want. The impact of that, those kind of things have existed for a very long time. And some people have been just, you know, stuck at a certain place and unable to go beyond that. And I just think it's important for us to put it in black and white, and tell the truth. And then, you know, there may be some pushback when it's all said and done, but I think we will have done our work, our job.
I'm thinking about all of the land grabs that have taken place and we're living, developing businesses and what have you. But most of that's the federal government, you know, with the military bases and naval weapons stations, Perry, Fort Eustis. How do we, because that's federal, do we still, how does that impact Virginia? This is the Virginia project, but it was Virginians who were negatively
Yes,
impacted,
yeah.
but so how does that still come into play when we talk about economics? Where, actually, almost all of this, but, all of these categories, but I'm just wondering, because that's, people lost so much.
Well,
And is that beyond our scope?
Listen, the truth about it, things changed a little bit, but I talked to Congressman Scott's office. I talked to Michael Herron, Mark Herron, before he left, because right there, the Army base, right here in Eastern Henrico, where the Army base is, my family lives there. Now, I didn't realize that, I didn't even know. And I'm talking to my aunt who's 86 years old, who shared with me that she remembered, she was about 4 years old. Basically, in the middle of the night, all of them moving and her aunts and uncle, because the Army came in and took the property. I said, did you all get compensated on that? She said, I'm not sure. All I know, we couldn't find any way to do it. And she's still living, and she knows that. Now, the rest of us had no clue, because they didn't talk about it. But I found out all of them lived there, and I was going through Congressman Scott's office and asking him to help us research it, some research there. So I don't think that my family or I would have been unique in this happening. So, even if it's noted in some way, if it's not going into deep detail, I think it's going to be beneficial. The information will not just be beneficial to Virginians, but I think it's beneficial based on what happened here in Virginia, beneficial to the nation. I think that if we could find a way to make sure that that's interjected into those kind of things, interjected into the final document, I think we should do it. Now, if somebody else may have some other opinions about that, but those are my words.
So it sounds as if this is fundamentally a historical document.
I think so.
It's
Yes.
how we got here.
Yes.
So we're not political scientists or economists, we're explaining the historical burden.
Yes, yes. And the burden that still exists for so many generations of people. Okay. Fred, anything for your thoughts?
I would just say, well, I think if you read the bill, the text of the statute, that's what we're doing. On the flip side of that, I would also say, one of the things that's really a problem, I think, with the public conversation around this is that everybody thinks that reparations simply means handing somebody a check. And anybody who's actually read anything about reparations knows that's not true. There are lots of ways to do restorative justice and other things. And I don't think the solution in all of these areas is the same.
Right.
I was just talking to a friend the other day who was working on the Georgetown project, looking at people that they enslaved, and they had a pretty good solution. Descendants of those people get free tuition to go to Georgetown. So I think there's lots of different ways you could address these. I hesitate to say much more because it's really your job to do this.
My job is to actually.
But I think if there's viable ideas out there, how that would look, why not propose?
I'm not opposed to it at all, just trying to think about how we phrase this so that it has the impact that you're talking about, right? And it has the weight of historical understanding, that it looks to the future and acknowledges something concrete. That was my original question. Just that we all know what the history has been, right? But what we're going to do about it. And what I don't know is how you would phrase such a statement about that, and with what degree of specificity. We don't need to know that now, but as we do our work and research and thinking about what is it we're trying to come up with, partly it is to understand other forms of reparation that have been the same. We do believe there needs to be reparation here are the ways it's been done, here's something that's particularly suitable for Virginia. Perhaps, is that kind of, does it sound right there? Okay.
And I brought up, and I think you, Craig, right, because the education piece was one that I've had conversations over and over again with in some of the university presidents, that, you know, when we talk about education and the hands that were very much on brick and mortar to build those universities, then, you know, maybe you need to go back and look at the families, if that information is available, and say to those families, okay, listen, you guys have we open the doors to you to come to the university and for a generation or certain generations to make certain that, you know, you have access to education. You know, I mean, there are so many ways, again, and I'm like you, and I've said it, and I hope I don't get in trouble now, because I don't, you know, if you give me $3,000, and that's supposed to be my rent, I might not know what to do with the $3,000. I mean, if I've not learned and understand the economic benefit of having free cash on hand, and what do I do with it in terms of investing, in terms of making certain that I'm taking care of certain things that's going to be sustaining, I may not have that information. I may not have the capacity. And so my $3,000, some people say, well, just give me the $3,000 anyway. But I want we want whatever is happening in people's lives at this point to be sustaining. We want generations, create generational wealth. And so those are the kind of things that need to be extremely looked into as we are moving and make recommendations. What could be recommended that would be sustaining for the next generation, you know, and to sort of, I don't know if we're ever going to really make up this, you know, get it to a point where people are, the reparation will come in a way that things are restored, but we could take our best shot at trying to say this could be very helpful, and not just for the next generation, but the generation after. If people had these life-sustaining things in their, you know, education, housing, those kind of that it could really be a jump start for the next generation.
So there's been, I guess my other point there too, that you brought it up earlier, is when people say, oh, well, I don't have anything to do with that. We're not talking about individual people, we're talking about system.
System, that's right.
And so it has to be a systemic solution.
Yes.
Because it was a system that created these issues.
Yes.
So I mean, I just think that that's at the core of it for me, that it has to be at that level. Get you out of the whole, you know, imaginary blame game that people think is going on.
Sorry, I was
Yes, okay,
trying to
good to
listen
see you.
trying to listen and I kept losing, but
Yeah.
I appreciate the conversation that's taking place now, because I think that I know this is probably some of the tough conversations about, do you provide some support to the individuals who are directly impacted by it, or do you do things that will improve the overall improvement of African Americans in the community? For instance, with education, there's a severe shortage of African American teachers. And part of the reason that I work with young people and I try to get, they want to go into education, but a lot of them can't go into education because when they decide, it's after they've already gotten an undergraduate degree, they can't afford to go back for 2 more years because they are first generation students and they have a lot of student debt. So those are the type of things that are tied to systemic racism, because their parents were limited and they're first generation. So other ways to assist in that, you know, and that's one of the things that I do in Fredericksburg. I get $5,000 to put them through a career switching program, and these kids who really want to teach don't have to go back and get more debt. They don't have to stop working. They get their teacher certification at the same time while they are working full time. And I can have about 5 or 6 African American males in one school, and it's made a tremendous difference in the lives of all those African American students, not just the male, but also the female, and also white students. People say, well, how do white students benefit from it? I think that many of them have never had a black teacher before, or a black authoritarian figure before, and that helps them when they come to work for me. So it does, those are some of the things that I think we do, and we talk about generational wealth. One of the best ways of generating generational wealth is homeownership.
Yes.
So if we want to address the issues of what is happening in the past relative to that market, if we can give stipends that can be used to help them to get a home, the down payment that they need, so they can take advantage of some of these programs out there that require a little down payment, or Habitat for Humanity that all you need is some skin in the game and some financial. If you can say that these funds can be used to address this issue of what has happened in the world of home, of real estate and investment, all, and to create some generational wealth, then these stipends have to be used for home ownership, and that's how you create generational wealth. I mean, that's one of the benefits. I'm not sure if this is related to what you all talked about.
No, it is
but-
very much so.
right.
Yes, absolutely. Great discussion. Dr. Ayers, little more clarity.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
we have a lot of work before us. Yeah, that's what this is about.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a good for help.
And at the college level, I mean, we look at education, one of the challenges for HBCUs is probably getting more African American persons who can go and get their PhD and teaching. So that's another way to do it, provide grants for African Americans who are interested in teaching at HBCU, et cetera. So there are creative ways to do it, and I think that would be more acceptable to the larger community, because they'll see that they too are benefiting
Right.
from it too.
Right.
Just as they have suffered from the fact that we have not been able to achieve alphabets. Racism itself and discrimination doesn't support the capitalist model in the first place, because you're not letting the best of
Right.
everybody to develop to their fullest potential. So this is the way that benefits everybody. Not that we're trying to placate everybody, but I think it'll be more palatable and more acceptable to the community at large, because they know that everybody benefits.
Yeah. Oh. Great. Good discussion. Thank you. Great. All right, anything that's, all right, so he asked, the question that Dr. Ayers asked about the committee sub-report. We're going to get those who are, one of the things that we need to do is to make certain that whichever committee that you're on, that between the 2 or 3 individuals, that there's one person, there's a point person. And I'm hoping that you all can get together between now and the next meeting, at least one time, and possibly two, so that you can have something to report as we come to the next meeting, because again, that time is really it'll be here sooner than later, much sooner than we think. And Dominique just need to make certain that she is capturing the thoughts, the school of thoughts that you're presenting in these various committees, in terms of how we get to where we're going. We do have some time that we will have an overall discussion as bring about the recommendations, an overall discussion on, justice and equity. How do we move forward with that? How do you make what kind of recommendations that we think will be most beneficial? And then she can help capture that, and then we'll have it in a form that people can participate or at least have some insight into what they're thinking. Because again, this is going to be a document that we may be well gone on our way, but this is going to be left for everybody else too. So we want to make sure that it's made available in a form that people could accompany. Okay. All right. Moving on.
Sorry, not to be
yes.
annoying today.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Perhaps somebody could send out a message to all of us, asking us to get together for our subcommittees. Would be a helpful prod to kind of trigger that process and maybe contact information. Thanks.
Dr. Allen, you stuck with me.
I don't feel stuck.
Okay, moving on, coming to close to the end, and I guess today we're going, at the public comment, we have an opportunity to share anything at that time. You guys really getting us at work at our best today. So discussion items and update from commissioners. Any updates that anyone would have, anything that's happening that you think that we could benefit from? We're going for this purpose. And I know Dr. Alexander has a lot to share and brings that as relates to that. What's going on in your world?
Well, you know, there are a number of organizations like the Urban Renewal Center and what is it? I know the acronym is WPA, but it's a architectural group in Norfolk. Johnny Finn's group at Christopher Newport, and a whole host of other entities that are looking at just ongoing discrimination in housing, flooding and other issues, ongoing redlining. You can basically overlay the redlining map with the issues that are continuing to go on, areas that are still polluted, areas that are still have brown, what is it? Is it brown zones? What is it called? Brownfields. Areas that, when it comes to municipal policies, they always seem to leave those areas out. Those areas are not represented when the city is, you know, recently, for example, in Norfolk, where you have the Army Corps of Engineers that used its policy document to decide which areas were worthy of having levees put there and which areas were not. And it's always the usual suspects of the worthy ones, because the model that they use is really based on the redlining model that goes back to the 1930s. And they have not updated that, nor has there been a willingness to update that. And so you're seeing the same things going on, and being able to access those resources and have them as a part of the website, I think would be really helpful, especially in the areas of economic and housing. But it also has to do with the laws. You know, you can kind of crisscross those three areas. But I'm happy to send the contact people and the web addresses to, you know, really highlight a lot of what's going on. And many of them do feature the issues where African Americans are the dominant populations in Richmond area and Hampton Roads. To really, you know, I mean, they highlight how even state funding does, you know, just sort of ignores those areas, even though they're economic engines, but it doesn't matter. They ignore those areas. They do. I mean, the roads, for example, in the western part of the state are far better than the roads in the areas where the economy is providing a lot of dollars to the state. And you would think that, you know, those areas are poor by comparison, they're really not. So, you know, we're still seeing a lot of old practices. You know, this old wineskin is still dominating and is not accepting the new wine coming in. Sorry about that.
No,
analogy there.
You gotta send some information to.
Yes, yes.
And
In
Mr.
fact, I've already sent Dominique the report from the law commission.
Okay, good, excellent.
South.
And Mr. Richardson, I'm gonna go to you next, so you can look. But there were several other commissions as well, that under the Northern administration, I know the one in terms of law, but there wasn't.
African American history education.
Right. Yeah, so, so we probably need to,
Happy to send that.
yeah,
report
to send all of those to be, because there was some great work that came out of the work that you all did, even though some things were distracted. Okay.
It's also the case that, Dr. Allen speak to, for MCV, there's a House bill about, acknowledgement of enslavement by public universities, by schools, and with various, and that's something else I wanted to say, is that we actually have leading places in the United States, sort of Winterberry, and UVA right now, I think, places that have done, especially Winterberry, has done great work on the front, but there's, the same way that there's work for us to build on in the past, there's simultaneous work going on now. Those universities are charged with talking about some sort of compensation, some sort of memorialization, so I think we want to be coordinated.
That house bill might.
Yeah. It's exactly related to this. So I'm sure to sponsor that.
I'm not sure.
But that's happening this spring.
Yeah.
So that's what we can build upon.
Okay, excellent.
And then at UVA, it's the descendant community who's been doing a lot of the thinking about what that distribution looks
All right, well, I think that we can, all of those reports, yeah. We could, I mean, and this is the other piece of the resources, being able to direct people to something that we not necessarily, I mean, some individuals have been at the table, they've certainly had their hands on, but the bottom line is, this is resources. You can just, you don't have to look anywhere, we're gonna have it right here, and then people, again, can just go to it, and begin to, explore what happened, review it, based on the information. Great work that has been done, and the experts and professionals who have been doing this work for decades, with those who are sitting at the table. All right, Mr., when you have anything for us, Mr. Richardson?
Just briefly,
Thank you for being, you missed my 25-minute speech, but how great you all were. And,
I heard a lot of. I have to listen quite carefully, but thank you for all of that. So the only thing I'll share is that, the healthcare, nonprofit healthcare system under Washington Healthcare projects where we are required every 3 years to do a community health needs assessment. This year, we decided to do it in conjunction with the health department. And we decided that we would do some of it from an equity lens as well. And what we really are looking at, some of the disparities that exist. Well, if we're going to address things, we know the impact is that there are disparities. So look at the disparities and let's see what we can do to address them. We can't do everything, but in healthcare, for instance, we're looking at maternal health. And some of that can be traced back to this too, because people are saying it's economics. It's not economics because college educated African American women die at a rate sometimes 2 or 3 times that of white women. Same thing with deaf kids. And so we're looking at those things in terms of education, healthcare, housing. And actually, housing and mental health and access to care were the 3 top things that the community determined. And so with mental health, we're even looking at how we build a pipeline for more healthcare and mental health workers, because, and particularly as it relates to African Americans. I mean, I just left a kid today who needs, and they acknowledge that he'd like to get counseling, but it's hard to find someone who looks like him, who understands and who's been through the same things that he can get to refer him to. So fortunately, there was one thing that's come out of the General Assembly, maybe where is Boost 200, you all familiar with that? You probably are. Basically, it provides for persons who are trying to become a certified licensed social worker. They may have the MSW degree, but they don't have the 200 hours of supervisors say, because that's not something that you can get a student loan for. It runs, and it's $125, $150 an hour. The state actually allotted enough money for maybe 100 or more persons, particularly those from underrepresented communities to get that supervised, let's say, supervision paid for free. So that's worth $20,000 or $30,000 a year. So when you think about, again, first generation folks who want to do good, do well, and student loans, they can't afford that $25,000 or $30,000, whatever it costs, but through something that the state did, we are able to get some around young people who have their master's in social work become licensed. So that will help. Things like that will help, because sometimes, we think, okay, we're going to allow them to get educated. They have graduated, but we don't look at what's prevented them from moving to the next step of getting into the workforce. So that's one thing with healthcare. We're looking at increasing the number of African American nurses and doctors and everything else. In education, and we're looking at ways to get more African American teachers and administrators into the classrooms, and housing. One of the things that I'm doing outside of what we're doing is, trying to make sure that when we have Habitat for Humanity building in our communities, that African American families and some of those who lived in those communities are beneficiaries of it. I know the neighborhood wherever there were 5 new homes built there, and only one was occupied by someone who grew up in that community, and the other 4 were people who were looking to move into the city and got a great deal. Now, when I walk through the neighborhood, because I know that we're going to build maybe another 12 or 15, when I'm walking through there, I see people, I ask them, hey, would you like to buy a house? If you've been living there, you've been here for 25 years, you've been paying $1,700, $1,800 a month in rent. And so we're trying to now prepare them for that in terms of getting their credit ready, building up a down payment and things like that. So we're trying to do what we can in our little community in terms of reducing the disparities, and those may be things that anything we get out of here, if there's a lot of low hanging fruit out there that will make a significant impact about investing in these folks, so that when you couple that with already existing programs that they can't qualify for because they don't have the down payment, or they don't have this, they don't have that, we can make more of them qualify so they can be beneficiaries and improve their life.
Sounds like great, a lot of good things going on. You got your hands in.
Introverts,
Yes, thank you so much. And so if anything that you think that we might be helpful or think would be, would benefit from knowing what's going on, by all means, send some information to Dom, we'll be sure to the rest of us. Okay. All right, Andrea. I'm saying it look like, okay, I'm having a moment. Andrea, you was the first name. I'm trying to get that. Anyway.
Well, I just wanted to point out some of the work that we've been doing at the Heritage Center that might be of use here. We've got a mapping Seaville and a mapping Albemarle project where we've already finished the Charlottesville mapping project, where we've taken all the sort of racial covenant deeds and mapped them for the city, which allows us to understand, you talk about redlining that occurs in larger areas. Well, these kinds of these systems have also occurred all in the rural area. Albemarle County is particularly interesting because the kind of wealth, right? It's the 4th richest part of Virginia as a consequence of chattel slavery, ultimately. And so when you start to map these deeds, we're mapping both Charlottesville post 1910, which is that 1910 ordinance that becomes unconstitutional in 1917. So there's this whole notion of de jure and de facto segregation. And in the minutes of the city council, it even says this will allow for desegregation of the city. It says it in the minute. So we'll map Charlottesville is finished. Albemarle County is 3/4 done. And we just got a, IMLS grant to then map all the Black deeds. Right? The hope is to, number one, restore some people's sense of property ownership. But for me, it's to take the covenant maps, lay them over top of the Black deeds. And then the differences of that moment where a deed, until at least 1968, is irrevocably removed from Black hands, you can then assign a real property value to that, or like a future cost, right? And then in that turn, really sort of impact policy. And the Mapping the Seaville project was used pretty extensively for Charlottesville's comprehensive plan, their most recent comprehensive plan. And we're mapping it along lines of utilities, infrastructure, all of those kinds of things. We'll be able to lay those kinds of maps over on top. So hopefully the Albemarle grant will be done by the end of the year, and then we'll begin the Black deeds. And this was largely driven by a conversation I had with a community member who said to me that there's folklore in her family that where the University of Virginia has its tennis courts was actually her family property. Right? And nobody really knows. This is just a story she heard once. And so I promised her that I'd try and track it down. And so that's what one of the big projects we're working on, that I think process-wise will certainly inform some of the things that we're thinking about here. Because as we've all said, the through lines are everywhere, and it's a lot in this notion of property ownership and lack thereof.
Well, going back to the whole issue of generational wealth, that's where our wealth was obtained in the monumental way. And that's where so many individuals are robbed of that.
Yeah.
Basically, it's taken right from under them.
Yeah. And you know, just to reiterate everything that we've already said, how much information people just don't have, right? Because they don't have the capacity to go into the records. You have no idea what you'll find in those records. It's pretty considerable when you really think about what we are not aware of.
How receptive are the people in Charlottesville and other areas to what you all do?
I think Charlottesville is somewhat unique. They've been doing this research for quite some time. And so there's already, I would say, a propensity towards this kind of work. But I also think that much of it was driven by the university, but there's also a fairly consistent group of local scholars. But this post-emancipation piece is the piece that's really just now being lifted up in the way that you are able to see some really interesting data sets and the way those data sets have been used. Charlottesville has the distinction of if it's something that can be bad, in some ways you can find it there, you really can. Somehow they figured out in that 45,000 people town, 150,000 people county, to reflect the entire history of racism in America. In one way or another. But it's a good narrative, right? It's the origin story, and what happens in that origin story is there.
Thank you, Dr.
Well, as Dr. Ayers was mentioning, colleges and universities across Virginia have working on their individual history. And so we, at William and Mary, we've been doing that through the Women Project for over 15 years now. And, but there are a lot of just outstanding resources that are being found. And we just had our 13th annual symposium last weekend. And there's an amazing amount of research that's being conducted by families and communities that are going through finding their stories and sharing them. And they're great models for how to get this work done. And so there, I think they will be a good resource, for the different subcommittees. And I'm happy to share, information about, again, the people who participated in the symposium. It's, and it's not only, and at William and Mary, we're looking at William and Mary's history as an enslaver, but we're also looking at the post-emancipation history, right? And the story, Jim Crow, up until today, and how we have or have not interacted with the community. And I think a lot of state and private institutions in Virginia do that. So I think it's a good resource.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I've spilled the beans before, and we're working and also have some disruptive questions before, but it's MCV / VCU. I've been really impressed with the work they're doing to engage the community about how they might respond to this House bill in the most thoughtful ways. And immediately people went into areas that we're talking about here in public. So I just think that, to echo your earlier comment, the time is right for us to make clear statements backed up by scholarship and knowledge that people can build upon.
A lot of great things going on, and so. Again,
Yeah, we have just revamped the Virginia Untold database, which, we both think that something which we know people are using extensively to look at the Civil War, African American life. We continue to add data to that portal. One thing on the education side that I think maybe Greg Crawford had blogged on, but I think is fascinating. The literary fund, which in the antebellum period funded UVA and probably there too, was partially funded by the resale of people who had self-emancipated but were captured. And that money, they couldn't identify the owner. That money went into the literary fund. So it's very direct connection. I mean, essentially the state was acting as a slave trader. So there are, we've always tried to mine those kinds of stories. We do support a lot of family history work. I'm sure most of you know about the Jackson Project here in Richmond. We've done a lot of work with them, which is all about displacement for urban renewal and highway building. So we just try to be as helpful as we can supporting these kinds of research projects.
Yes, and
I'm truly impressed with all these things I'm hearing going to take place in institutions of higher learning. And how do we, just a question to think about in the future, how do we ensure that others in other communities are able to benefit from these things, not only from the lessons that you learn, but also resources so that we can do it. We have a university in Fredericksburg. They definitely don't have the money to do the great things that you have to do. It's really fascinating, and I'm envious of what you all are able to do in your respective communities. And I'm sure there are people all across the Commonwealth who could benefit from this, and maybe there needs to be money for these things to be replicated in places that don't have the support of their respective academic institutions. Just an observation. It's fascinating.
yeah, there's a lot of great work, a lot more work being done, and we do need to look at how could it be replicated. We do need to look at, making certain that, and maybe some of the universities need to be partnering with some of the smaller institutions. So that everybody is in many ways learning together. I mean, I know some of the universities work together, because I know the medical field, the Massey Cancer Center and University of Virginia, they do. And so maybe this is one of those areas that we could sort of have some discussions about how do we, not merge, but how do we sort of take the opportunity to so everybody, many persons are benefiting from it. So we can have some more discussion, I think it's certainly more discussion.
I'll just say though, that is happening. I get called all the time, you know, and I don't, it's not necessarily, you know, organized or formal, but there are a lot of schools that call in Virginia and outside of Virginia, with questions about what we're doing and how we're doing it. And I'm sure that happens probably with other schools. So I don't know if there's a way to formalize that, but I know when we got started, we were, you know, William and Mary's the second institution to fund a program like this, and we had to figure out what to do. So we're very open to sharing what we get and for learning. And there's an organization called, there's a University Studying Slavery Consortium that when it started, it was just Virginia colleges and universities, and then it expanded. So now there are over 100 institutions, including at least one private high school and I think a community college, but now there are schools from the schools all over the United States, the West Indies, looking at these similar questions. So,
Jody didn't they just meet in North
they
Carolina?
just met at UNC.
Yeah.
As we think about forms of collaboration, people are beginning to collaborate now for the 2026 commemoration of the birth of the United States. I think that's one way for us to be framing what we're doing.
Yeah.
With a sense of urgency at this moment of historical reflection and reckoning. This is important. You know, Williamsburg and other folks in Williamsburg are working on this. It might be a way for us to associate ourselves with that.
Okay. I had a question. I wanted the group's input on this. I'm often concerned when I go to different museums, especially as I move towards the western part of the state, or the more rural parts of our state. And I go into a museum and I see a history that is still a cult of the lost cause history. We seem to want to fight and refight the Civil War, I guess, in the hope that there will be a different outcome. I'm not really sure, but you know, I'm wondering if we can speak to the way we educate our young people through museums, through libraries, through monuments, through, you know, just these historical markers. And are we consistent in the way that we're educating people, or do we have a lot of old stuff and then a few newer approaches?
Where are you looking at me?
Yeah.
Listen, I just think that there are, you know, this glory, I call it the glorified, the glorified way of disseminating information, okay, and making, you know, they're not refighting, they just continue to glorify it. Okay, they're not ready to go to the battlefield. I'll just continue to glorify it if you know what, that the South was the winner, that's all. But so I don't know what we do, because in many areas, in particular the rural areas, you know, it's still a certain mindset, a certain mentality. I don't know what we do with that. And I see it all the time. All the time. At least 45 to 60 days every other year. You know, it is that trying to get people moved beyond, and you see it across the nation. That's what's going on. I mean, it continue to be, you know,
Because museums get state funded.
Well, see, that's what I'm thinking of, those that are state funded especially.
Right, it's a stipulation that part of, if you're gonna get funding, you have to tell the story which is the way. I mean, you can't. No, but I mean, seriously, if you're giving them, it may not seem like a lot of money, but if you're giving them a third of their budget, a quarter of their budget, and you have that stipulation, just like anything else, if you're gonna be accredited, you have to meet certain standards, hospitals, education institutions, everybody else. That's the only other thing, otherwise these things are run by little small town folks who are gonna tell the story the way they want it, so I figure the only way you can do it is hide the money.
Yeah, well, that's the way.
But, you know, even with state-run programs, it comes down to money. You know, I served for a while on a group that basically vetted the new applications for state historical markers. And, you know, the good news is there's been a ton of them put up that do reflect a much newer history. But the bad news is the only time an old one comes down is when a car runs over it. And you wouldn't believe the texts that are on some of those, because those would come back to us. So, you know, in Southwest Virginia, you would have a marker that's titled "A Savage Outrage" about Native Americans. You know, so, you know, if the state had the money to do it, they probably ought to revisit all of the markers that were done before a certain period. But that certainly isn't going to happen in the current climate that we're in. Said that probably. You're the state employee. But anyways, you know, just it's difficult, and you're right. And the irony is that some of these counties had fairly large African American populations at one time, particularly in the mining areas of Southwest Virginia. But because of outmigration, they really don't anymore. Half of the lynchings in Virginia took place west of the Blue Ridge.
There are a lot of history spaces, art spaces, I think, that are most important to make these changes, because that's where most people get their news. And so, again, they are continuing to tell the same incorrect story.
Well, we are living in the day, but truth, I don't know what consequences, but certainly the truth, you know, we just, but I think that all of, you know, those things are, again, just, you can look at, you can try to go down those roads, but I think that the public, particularly in various places, those rural areas, where there are population of people who, they should also desire the truth, but many of them don't want to deal with it. I mean, there are folks who just don't want to deal with you coming in, anyone coming in and doing something that's going to upset. Okay, they were like, just, and I'm talking about African American. We just don't want to. We had it right in Charles City, but they didn't want to pull down the statue, and it's still up. Oh, yeah, it's still up. Because some of them didn't want to pull it down. Anyway, we're going to, so we can, you know, we're taking a lively time, and it's been good, great discussion. We can continue some of the discussion. And I'll follow up on some of these things that we can share today. But we want to open now for public comment, to give the public anybody desire to say something. It's open now for any public comment.
All right.
Oh, okay.
This is a good place, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow, 1619, with a long way. It's been a long time coming, Virginia. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is James. I am a Virginia descendant of slavery, right here in the great state of Virginia. Before I get started, I'd just like to resurrect the names of my ancestors for, you know, my lineage: Saunders, Johnson, Harrison, Tinsley, Dillard, and Arrington. We represent Bluefield, Virginia. He just mentioned the coal fields. My family migrated there after slavery. Tazewell County, Henrico, Franklin County, Gracie County, and Spotsylvania. You know, you from Fredericksburg? Yeah, so am I. Okay, perfect. To the host and the commission, thank you guys again for this meeting. This long overdue, as I mentioned earlier. It's important that we bring our ancestors to justice, who were once held in bondage, forced to work for no wages, and their descendants who were also sabotaged to true justice. I asked that future meetings be held in other parts of Virginia to give Virginia descendants of slavery better access to these meetings and have a chance for their voices to be heard. Some people came from pretty far, for example, Tidewater, a good friend right here, she actually came from all the way from to Tidewater. It was a nice drive to be here. So. It's all about sacrifice. The ancestors went through much worse. True justice, reparations, the making of amends for wrong that has been done by paying money to otherwise, or otherwise helping those that have been wronged by being forced to work, being raped, killed, beaten, castrated, Jim Crow, going through Jim Crow, red line, land theft, eminent domain, mass incarcerations. Shout out to the person that mentioned it, eminent domain earlier. We have Lumpkins Jail, which is right here in the city of Richmond, which is responsible for a lot of these torture taxes and also involved in the slave trade that benefit the economy right here in Richmond. The median wealth of Black families is projected to be 0 by 2053, the middle of this century. So yeah, thanks to we have racist housing contracts which stole $4 billion from Black Americans in the U.S. Thanks to legal and illegal immigration, that process has probably been sped up and potentially placing U.S. And Virginia descendants of slavery at the bottom as a potential permanent bottom caste in this country and as well as in this state. Contrary to generational wealth, we've inherited generational poverty, which has plagued the descendants of Virginia slavery, which is why Virginia, as once it was the largest slave state, must make reparations lineage-based and not race-based to address a specific group of people. I personally strongly reject the term of African American for this commission to utilize for this study, as the findings of this study need to be very specific and not include our brothers and sisters from the diaspora, respect to the Caribbean, but they have CARICOM, as well as continental Africans who came here willingly in mass after 1965 due to the Immigration Act of 1965. Black is also a culture as well as an ethnicity that belongs to us here in America, as identified by our birth certificates. We have institutions such as HBCUs, historically Black universities, churches. The list goes on. Black is, that's something, in the words of James Brown, I'm Black and I'm proud. Identifying as Black for at least a decade, as well as, to me, identifying for Black for a decade, along with your lineage being identified in the 1870 census, should be a qualifier, in my opinion. And then also, I understand the 5 pillars of reparations. I understand them clearly, but I think that a large part of the focus should be placed on direct cash payments. And we should be left to our own vices to handle those payments and not micromanage like other groups who have received information. For example, during the pandemic, Black businesses actually increased by 38%. We're very capable in the worst of times, so we can handle our own, our own finances. Financial literacy is actually very prevalent in the Black community right now. We're only, as far as our financial literacy, we're only 9 to 15%. We have a 9 to 15% lower. We're lower according to annuity.org. And it doesn't matter how people get their money. Some people, what they do with it, because ultimately it's our inheritance and our right. All right, something it's a debt that's owed. Thank you for your time. I look forward to Virginia leading the way and reparative justice for our ancestors. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Anyone else? But thank you so much. Thank you for your words and your, I guess you've been listening. Oh, she wanted to say something.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
Okay, so again, I'm Eve, and it's okay, I'll stand right here. I heard a lot about housing and land and education and jobs, and I like what the gentleman at the front said about how the problem is systemic. So the solution will also need to be systemic. The solution would need to match. So essentially, since we're talking about a debt that's owed, it would need to be repaid in order for it to have matched the bad stuff that's already happened. Like this gentleman right here just said, other groups didn't have to have this, they didn't have to prove their financial acumen before they were paid for what was owed to them. So I don't think that we should have the burden to do that as well. Even though I agree with what he said, we've been able to show we can do a lot, even with a little bit. I have a bachelor's and a master's, and I teach, and I've got a big family, and essentially we're living in poverty, and we've got access to a lot of these things that you guys say that we're supposed to have in order to build generational wealth. I own a house, part two, and essentially, we're going backwards while other groups don't have to show or prove anything that we have to. So I just think that as long as Virginia is keeping this in mind, I like to know that we're first, because this is the first state. Like, everybody keeps belittling the emphasis and impact that our state has had on the nation. And again, I think that if we're working hard to bridge the gap, that it would start with payment to the people who helped set out the nation. Thank you for planning.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. She has something.
Well, I guess I'll stand here as well. Good afternoon. Thank you all. I'm grateful that you all took the opportunity to even put this type of committee together in the first place. It's a good representation, especially for southern states, that Virginia be the first southern state to actually be out in the forefront when it comes to the harms and repair and restorative justice for Black Americans, especially those who are descended from chattel slavery and their descendants, as far as all of the harms that they experienced. Wow, you guys did say a lot of the things that I did want to say. I do agree that when we're in the midst of this study, that it should be lineage based. I brought here a copy of the census report from one of my ancestors. My family on my mother's side, I've already traced my lineage back to about 1622 on my mother's side. They're coming out of Nancy County, which is now Suffolk, Virginia, and I have others who are coming out of Norfolk County, which is now Portsmouth, Virginia, and New Kent, Virginia as well. I believe that the repair should definitely be lineage based, starting with those who are able to trace their lineage back to the 1870, 1880 census. I have bought a copy of the 1870 census, and I highlighted my fourth and my fourth great grandmother and great grandfather on this census report. Something that I wanted to express, I do agree with you all that in favor of cash payment reparations. I also agree that we're always, like you said, micromanaged as far as what we're going to do. I didn't hear any of that type of pushback to any of the Japanese Americans who received 11 million in repair for internment camps. I didn't hear any of that for the Jewish community who received reparations through the Holocaust, and it didn't even happen on the United States soil, but they wanted to pay for it anyway. I have relatives who were not able to get an education. As you see, I am an educated woman. I'm also a veteran, and I joined the military to be able to pay for an education because I am a product of the crack epidemic. And I have ancestors who fought in every war in this country. And I have a great grandfather, Elijah Copeland specifically, who was a Civil War veteran. And I have in my lineage where he sent off to apply for a pension and he was denied. I have that denial letter in my lineage. I have an uncle who just passed last weekend, my Uncle James Lacey White, who was a World War II and a Korean War veteran who was not eligible to receive the GI Bill. He was not able to get that. My grandmother was a victim of redlining. She had a highway built through her neighborhood. The house is no longer there. Her grandmother had a Cinemark built on top of her gravesite. And the trauma just continued to trickle down throughout our family. Our ancestors built this country for free. They were not compensated for the free labor that they produced. I'm a part of the Soul Down River project with the great Norfolk State University. I'm working on that project and I have been for 2 years now. And I've been able to put my hands on actual slave sales of people coming from Virginia, going down into the Mississippi, and how much they were charging for 2-year-olds and 30-year-olds and whole groups of families. There was a monetary value placed on the free labor that came from our ancestors. I understand that education is absolutely important, but we also have to take into consideration those Black Americans who are not able to get an education based off of the economic warfare that they may experience by different forms of substances that may have plagued how they were able to grow up in their thought processes and all of the different types of trauma with our drinking water. I lived around the corner from Washington Park projects where there was lead, they were lead based. I was right in the middle of all of that. So I do think that cash payment reparations is definitely a form of compensation if we can do it for everybody else, and then we can provide tangibles for other ethnic groups who just, come here off of a plane or off of a boat, and they're able to come into our communities and open gas stations and different businesses and profit off of the poverty that we already have. I feel like there should be some form of cash payment for us to have the debt repaid from our ancestors as well, because an education is great, but I do know some people who are educated and homeless. I do know people who have master's degrees that work at McDonald's and Walmart and stuff like that. So the debt should have a monetary value on it because the labor definitely made the United States of America, specifically the state of Virginia, one of the most wealthiest places in the world. So thank you guys for allowing us to come here and express that. Thank you for taking the time to actually listen to us. Thank you all for being as serious as you are about this, about our restorative justices and about our repair. And I look forward to the next meeting. So I just wanted to say thank y'all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all so much for your contribution and all of the thoughts that you shared with us today. We really do appreciate it. Really appreciate you taking your time and coming and being as engaging. It is everything that you have said will certainly be considered as we move along, in particular for that final report is important. Thank you so much. Do you have anything to say, little one? Listen, I think that's it. I don't have anything else at this point. Dominique, you did I forget anything? No. Okay. All right, Greg.
Oh, thank you very much.
Okay. Listen, thank you all. I think the next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, May the 10th at 1 p.m. The location has not yet been confirmed. But anyway, we will momentarily, soon get that information to you. So at this time, and again, thank you for such an in-depth discussion today on some very important issues that are helping to move us along. So at this time, I would ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting. Okay, the meeting, motion is made, properly second. All those in favor say aye. Those who want to stay here, say. So that's what I'm going. So thank you all. We're gonna have a great day. All right. Job.
Yeah, you do that. No,
French.
No. I've got to go to the city. Was in their head, so.